In our last lecture, we talked about operant conditioning and positive reinforcement, and what to positively reinforce. And what you're probably left with in that last lecture is there's probably a question in your head as to, all right, well, what do I do then if the child keeps writing on the wall after I try to stop the behavior and ignore that behavior, and the child keeps doing it? Well, of course, you can't keep having the child write on the wall if that's what you don't want them to do. So you can use another method in your parenting toolkit that I'm going to present to you now, and that is the method of timeout. Now, a lot of parents think of this not so much in terms of timeouts, they think of it in terms of punishment. Okay, so I want to talk about that a little bit. Punishment is basically enforcing a negative response towards a child to prevent a certain behavior from happening again. Okay, now punishment is kind of a harsh term. I don't really like to use it. That's why I like to use the term timeout, because I don't think punishment as a concept, the connotation of punishment doesn't really work in our society. It doesn't create a functional behavior change in the child. Okay. So when I'm talking about punishment, I'm not talking about things like spanking the child. All right. I'm not talking necessarily about punishment at all. I'm talking more about affecting a behavior change by getting the child to think about their behavior. Right. I'm going to take the strong position in this lecture and in this course that spanking is just not right. You shouldn't do it for your child, period. Okay, and a lot of parents will disagree with me on this because they think it's an effective way to control behavior and it's an effective way to build character or whatever in their child. Okay, but there's other ways to do that. All right. What spanking does is, to be perfectly honest, spanking will stop a behavior from occurring. Okay, in the short term. All right, so it's a good short-term solution. The problem is that short-term solution brings negative long-term consequences. All right. Now, how does that happen? How do those long-term consequences handled? Well, I'm going to tell you. For one thing, when you're spanking a child, you're sending the message through modeling, which we'll talk about next. You're sending the message through modeling that physical aggression is okay in order to control someone's behavior. Remember, children are much more receptive than they are productive. Okay, so that's one problem with spanking. The other problem with spanking is that it threatens secure attachment to the parent. Right? So now you spent all this time building a secure attachment by showing your child all sorts of love and affection, and now you're hitting the child. The child might not necessarily understand why you're hitting it, why you're spanking it. Okay? So the child's going to be confused. And if the child's confused, that means that there's a chance that you've just made that child afraid of you. Okay? And that kind of fear is going to threaten that secure attachment. And when that happens, that means the child may not come to you in order to communicate certain things that they want to communicate. Okay, because they're afraid of your response. All right, you're classically conditioning the child by spanking it. Okay, the child now associates a behavior that they may or may not understand with pain. Okay, so the child may not do certain things. Okay, may not draw on the wall anymore. Okay, but they may not do other things now. So you're also limiting their ability to explore their environment. Okay, right or wrong, you don't want to do that. Right, you want to make sure that the child has the confidence and the self-esteem to explore their environment. And by spanking the child, you're threatening that secure attachment and you're keeping them from doing that, because now they're going to be afraid to do other things because they don't want to be spanked. Okay? So you don't want to make them afraid of you. You don't want to kill their ability to explore. You don't want to threaten that secure attachment. You don't want to teach them the wrong lessons, okay, such as physical aggression is okay to control someone's behavior. Spanking does all of that. Okay? So how do you keep your child from writing on the wall when you've asked them not to do it and you're ignoring the behavior and it still doesn't go away? Well, then obviously you can be a little bit more proactive. And I find that timeouts work much better than anything else. By yelling at the child, by by spanking the child, certainly. And what you want to do is you want to address the behavior as a learning opportunity for the child. All right. So if the child writes on the wall, you say, okay, well, I asked you not to do that several times now. So I think what we need to do now is we need to take a timeout. Okay? And a good rule of thumb is that for how old the child is, that's how many minutes in timeout you want. All right? So if the child is 4, then give it a 4-minute timeout. If the child is 6, give it a 6-minute timeout. 6-minute timeout. Okay? Now it's very important that while the child's in timeout, that the child be silent and think of what they were doing and how they got there. Okay, and children will do this. They have the internal capacity, the brain capacity, to think about their behavior. Okay, so you can set a timer if you want, or you can say, okay, well, you started talking. I want you to think about what your behavior was and why, how it affected you, and why we don't do things like that. So I'm going to start the timer over again. Okay, and I want you to sit silently for 4 minutes. Okay, and then do it until the child can do it. It helps them regulate their behavior, helps them regulate their emotion. It helps give them that inhibitory process to where they control themselves, okay, and think about their behavior before they do it. Okay, so it's practice for controlling their behavior, right? After the timeout's over, then that's the time to talk to the child. Okay, and say, okay, why do you think maybe it wasn't a good idea to write on the wall? And why did mommy or daddy keep asking you to stop doing that? Okay, engage in a conversation with your child. They're completely capable of doing this, all right, particularly after the age of 3 years old. They're completely capable of doing this, and you as a parent are now a teaching opportunity for the child. Okay, they're going to ask questions. They might even say, I don't know, and then you can instruct the child. Okay, you say, well, if we write on the wall, that means we have to clean it up, and we'd rather not have to clean it up, right? So let's do something that's not quite as messy and is not going to hurt the walls of the house and that kind of thing. And you can even engage in metaphors such as, well, the house doesn't really like to be drawn on. Okay, do you like to be drawn on as a child? No, of course not. Okay, so we shouldn't really draw on the house. Okay, unless of course your child likes to be drawn on, then you need another metaphor. But I'm saying you can use inanimate objects if you want. You can use your creativity and create a world of fantasy for the child. They love that. It's fun for them. Okay, but you want to engage in the child's thought process and get them thinking and talking about it. Okay, because like I said, it's a learning opportunity. All right, that's what timeout should be used for, not as punishment. Okay, but as a learning opportunity. Okay, as an opportunity for the child to build their creative skills and to build their self-regulation, and for them to solve the problem themselves. Okay, and this will lead them to become better problem solvers later on in life. So this is a very key thing, a great opportunity for you as a parent to act as an instructor and for them to learn a new concept in their lifespan development. Okay, in our next lecture we'll talk about modeling, which is just as important as the others. So we'll see you then.